on Prime Crime.
How do you pick the ones that you think you're going to kill?
Depends on how the neck looks.
The story of one of America's most infamous murderers.
Because he did this same MO over and over again, he got very good at it.
His own words on the killings.
Did you have any conversation with her?
My mind was on killing her.
And hear from the people who sat across from evil.
I'll never in my life ever interview another killer like that in my career.
Pluck me another grape. I said, how many grapes y'all got on to find him?
Hey there everybody, I'm Jesse Weber and welcome to Prime Crime, where we break down some of the most compelling and memorable true crime cases from across the country. Our next story is about a killer who targeted vulnerable individuals that society often overlooks. It's a case full of chilling confessions and a decades-long journey to unmask the man behind dozens of murders. In 1970, a woman is strangled to death and buried in a shallow grave out in Florida. From there, for the next 35 years, bodies would be found across different states. No connection, no prime suspect. It would take decades before these cases would be solved and finally connected to one man.
She was pretty, a light-skinned, brown, honey-colored skin.
This is Samuel Little, also known as Samuel McDowell.
I met her in a nightclub in New Orleans. So I took off the exit, went, and that sure enough was a road leading into the woods. And we went in and parked.
He may not look like much when investigators began interviewing him in 2018, in his late 70s and suffering from health conditions. But the man you're seeing was the most prolific serial killer in United States history.
I grabbed her by the legs and pulled her to the water. That's the only one that I ever killed by drowning.
That's just one confession of many that Little provided to authorities after his capture at the then age of 71.
I'll never in my life ever interview another killer like that in my career. You know, you first see him, he's this little old man in a wheelchair that will remind me of a little old man on a porch, rocking in a chair, telling you his stories about his life, although his stories were demented.
North Little Rock. Tell me what that girl looked like.
Oh man, I loved her. She was a heavy-set, big old yellow hair, and had buck teeth. It had a gap between the teeth, that's what it was. She's too big for me to carry her, so I just pulled her out of the car and laid her on that trash that was lit there.
There was no remorse whatsoever. It was a matter of fact. I got him to kill. He went into great detail in his crimes.
Oh, the only thing I know in all is that I killed her.
And that was your intent?
That was my intent.
Sam Little ultimately confessed to 93 murders from 1970 to 2005. That's more than Ted Bundy, the Zodiac Killer, and the Golden State Killer combined.
We know of at least 93 women who were murdered. He was not going to stop. He actually told police that he found it sexually satisfying to rape and kill women.
In order to really understand Sam Little's reign of terror, let's first dig into the killings themselves. Like many serial killers, Sam Little had an MO.
Did you ever shoot any of these girls?
Shoot.
Yeah, with a gun?
I get no kick out of shooting.
All right. So everything was done by manual strangulation. Did you ever use like a belt or cloth or
No
anything?
garrots and all that, no.
No ligatures at all?
My hands.
Just your hands?
And without that, I wouldn't want to do it.
He would take his hands and he would put them on their throats and he would choke them, and sometimes he would allow them to revive so he could see the fear in their eyes before choking them out finally.
I was squeezing hard enough for the breath could be cut off, and sooner or later she's gonna start wanting to catch a breath, and that's when she tried to pull my hands off. It was too late then.
Was it exciting to you at the time?
Yes, it was.
He's a sadistic killer for sure. He wanted to feel like their neck swallowing. And I think his foreplay, basically, he would take a lot of them to eat, and they would go eat, and swallow and drink. And I think that was his foreplay. That's what got him excited, was watching that neck.
So how was it that Little was able to commit dozens of rapes and murders without getting caught?
The reason Sam Little went undetected for so many years is because of who he targeted, primarily drug-addicted women and sex workers.
They didn't know who the hell was doing it.
Yeah.
I'll go back to the same city sometime and pluck me another grape. How many grapes y'all got on to find him?
Sure.
That one right over.
There's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So basically, these were women nobody would miss.
He knew which women would be not cared about. He knew which women would not be missed. He knew which women would be susceptible to his advances, either whether they're romantic or he was providing them drugs or providing them alcohol.
She was a hoe, yeah. She's a hoe. She was trying to make some money now.
He knew which women on the lower levels of our society he could actually lure into his car to take to a secluded place, to quickly kill them in the dead of night where nobody could see them, and then to dump their body immediately and get out of Dodge. This is how he got away with it. And I'm not just saying, he says it.
Long as you didn't get in out there with the people that would be immediately missed,
Yeah.
and very important to either family or business or somebody.
Yeah, you got pretty good at knowing which ones.
Well, I'm not going to go over there in the white neighborhood and pick out the little young teenage girl or like the ladies do. You know?
And that's how Little got away with it, over and over again. And because he did this secret, because he did this same MO over and over again, he got very good at it.
Coming up, Little had spent his life in and out of prison and had almost been captured before. So what happened?
I've been lucky on numerous times.
Yeah.
I wanted to be in the back somewhere concealed.
So she was already dead in the car?
Yeah.
Okay.
After Samuel Little is arrested in 2012 on a narcotics charge, investigators realize he's actually responsible for several cold case killings. Little would ultimately confess to 93 murders. Prior to his capture, though, Little was a man who had been arrested almost 100 times and only spent a total of 10 years behind bars. So how was he not connected to these crimes sooner? And more importantly, how was he still on the streets for all this time?
I was lucky in Florida. I had a dead body in the car. Got to get the choked out. Yes, and I'm getting ready. But boom, 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 blue lights everywhere. Police car and come back behind the building. He seen us parked there. I jumped out the car and tried to act like I'm zipping my pants. He said, "Oh, what the fuck? What's going on over here?" I said, "Nothing." I said, "Me and my wife just got in the course." Put this damn car, looked in that window with a flashlight, I'm telling you. Shining right on the girl. She laying up there like that.
And she's dead.
Dead.
Yeah.
And as soon as he was looking in there, I said, "Yeah, right here." I got his mind off. Just in the nick of time before he took a second look. And I got away like that. He said, "Well, you gotta get out of him." Wow. I got in the car and took off.
The police weren't able to put together a strong case against him because he himself knew how to get away without leaving a lot of evidence.
I never cut, stabbed, burnt, bit. No, none of that. I know blood. I don't like blood.
He would initially strike his victims in the head and then strangle them. And I think ultimately, when you think about this, you're not going to have any forensic evidence later. The bodies have deteriorated, so there were no markings. You couldn't see knife wounds to bones. You could not see gunshot bullets. There was no fractures in these bodies.
I found about pig farm or something.
Wow.
And that's how they found the girl that landed in the field next to the pig farm. All the mother skin ate off her face. The rats got over.
Sam Little would dispose of bodies in the Everglades. He would roll them down hills. He would put them in densely forested areas.
She was like partially concealed by the vegetation, left for last.
DNA didn't really start being utilized until the mid-1990s. So he was able to get away with any type of sexual crimes.
Alabama did the same thing. I had this black chick up in the car, and just got through killing them. This mother pulled up with the sheriff pulled up.
Nobody ran the plate or anything like that.
No,
So they didn't put that on.
He didn't run the plate. Nobody, no, he wasn't looking for no. They found the body, man, about a month later.
Even though he had 100 arrests and served only 10 years prison time, I would blame partially the criminal justice system, because a lot of the cases against him were dismissed, they weren't followed up with, and he was fleeing constantly. He was very transient and leaving to different areas, cities across the nation.
Little had had close calls before, but nothing may have come as close as to when he was directly tied to two brutal murders.
You know, we caught him. We believed he was responsible for Melinda Lupre's murder in 1982. And we know absolutely he was responsible for Patricia Mount's case.
Now, when you're driving around with Patricia Mount in the front passenger seat, did you have any conversation with her?
My mind was on killing her. She let me feel her throat, I was caressing it. And before I knew it, I tied my hands around it and strangled her to death.
After Patricia Mount's nude body was found in that hayfield, hair fibers and witness testimony linked Little to the killing, and he went on trial. Yet once again, it was Little's lucky day. The jury found him not guilty. As for Melinda Lupree, a grand jury opted not to indict him.
Other media has come to us saying, you know, if y'all had just tried him and he was in jail, all these people would be alive. And I will tell you that Melinda Lupree had been out in the elements for over 3 weeks. And if you saw a picture of her remains, you would understand there were no evidence there to gain. There were so many things, so many times that he was arrested for assaulting women, and the women were ladies of the night. They were on drugs. Those don't make the best witnesses, unfortunately.
A combination of lack of hard evidence, issues with witnesses, and Little's own ways of covering up his crimes resulted in weak cases and him continually striking plea deals for shorter prison stints. Jillian Lauren, a New York Times bestselling author and someone who spent hours interviewing Sam Little, has made it her mission to be the voice of these victims.
Because of the fact that they were often prostitutes, often drug addicts, often women of color, women who were considered unimportant, or as some cops used to talk about, the women who were turning up in South Central dead almost every morning in the 80s. NHI, No Humans Evolved. But, you know, it wasn't just cops. He was tried by a jury of his peers. Once again, it's us who let him go.
Up next, Little's crime spree comes to an end, but his story is just beginning.
I had desire, strong desire, to her and kill her.
And she played with you a little bit on the way out there, and you killed her in the car.
Yes, I would try for it.
You beat it, too.
Samuel Little, who's come to be known as the most prolific serial killer in United States history and whose crime spree spanned from 1970 to 2005, was able to elude justice for years. That is, until 2012.
The prosecutors and the police were never able to actually pin a case on him until he left his DNA.
California had actually had a case where they had run DNA on a cold case, and they had an identical case, or one that was a similar MO. And when they tested that DNA, the DNA came back to an identical person in Sam Little.
In September 2012, Little was arrested in a homeless shelter in Kentucky on an outstanding California drug charge. When he was extradited back to LA, investigators such as Detective Mitzi Roberts were able to link Little's DNA to material left at crime scenes in the 1980s.
I was already putting together a Sam Little case because I was working all the cold cases here in my area in Mississippi. Los Angeles, Mitzi Roberts called asking, do we have anything about a Sam Little case? So she came down, interviewed our witnesses to put together a method, an MO of the killer Sam Little. It fit everything with their cases.
In 2014, Little was convicted of the murders of 3 of his victims, Carol Alford, Audrey Nelson, and Guadalupe Apodaca. But in a way, Little was also answering for all the women he had killed.
They were human beings in that they were all totally different. They're you.
In September 2014, Little was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms in prison without the possibility of parole. While Little had maintained his innocence his whole life, in 2018, he finally decided to open up to investigators.
What's up, man? It's so good to meet you, and I'd like to personally thank you for being generous enough with your time.
I hope I can clear up some of it for you.
When somebody is incarcerated and they know they're spending their life in jail, their communication with the outside world is, in essence, gone.
You're so valuable to society at this point, I think.
I'm worth something to these
Yeah.
people. I thought I was a worthless thing to them.
Sorry,
People
too.
saying that I'm worth something.
He opened up because it was his exit strategy. This was, again, part of his overall plan. This guy definitely was ready to talk as soon as he knew that he wasn't going to be receiving the death penalty.
That's the letter that you requested, that our state attorney will not pursue the death penalty under any circumstances.
Now the question became, how do you get Little to open up?
I'd love to talk to you about Gainesville a little bit. You know, that's where I live and work.
I'm not a Gator fan, I'll tell you right now.
You must be Ohio State, though.
Right.
You know what Urban did for our Gators, though.
Leave Ohio State behind. Yeah.
Now, you were a USC fan, too? Or?
No. I can't stand California fans.
But you lived out in California for a while.
I've lived there several times.
Going to be Little's interview for sure. Wanted to make sure that myself, as a prosecutor, was going to be somebody that he wouldn't mind talking to. We knew that he liked the Cleveland Browns. He's from the Cleveland area. We're from the Cleveland. And so that kind of was our cash, if you will, to be able to build this rapport with him.
What do you remember about it?
Talking shit.
Talking.
How I did it, I talked to him straight. I told him he was a big perv. And I told him I didn't agree with him. He would say, "What'd you call me, a perverted homicidal maniac?" And I said, "Well, that's like certainly one of the things I'd call you." And he was just like, "Whatever, you're a hoe." I was mostly kind of honest with him.
Coming up, Little may have confessed to numerous murders, but how do we know if he was telling the truth? More when we return. Hey, by the way, one of the tools that we use in our stories here on Law and Crime is something called Truth Finder. They're our sponsor, and Truth Finder is one of the largest public record search services in the United States. And with a paid subscription service, you can get access to unlimited reports about almost anyone. It is so easy to use. You plug in a name and location, and then you get all these details where someone lives, works, their criminal history. That can give you some peace of mind. I mean, hey, especially since that includes looking up registered sex offenders that might be in an area. And right now you can get 50% off of confidential background reports. Just go to truthfinder.com/LCPrimeCrime.
The only thing I did was one was strangled. Oh. Some lived and some didn't.
After serial killer Samuel Little was finally caught in 2012 and convicted of murdering 3 women back in the 1980s, he decided to confess to more of his crimes from 1970 to 2005. And that's when the floodgates opened.
So I killed a girl there.
In Ocala?
Gangster. I killed a girl over there in Ocala too.
She also talked about a young lady that you dumped down a stairwell.
Yeah, white girl.
That was a white girl?
Yeah, she was white. I got her out of the car, pulled her out, and drug her into the groups back there.
Little ended up confessing to killing 93 people and would ultimately plead guilty to several more murders. How do we know, though, that Little was actually telling the truth?
I absolutely believe in his credibility of the stories that he told. He knew everything about my crime in 1982. And then the 1977 remains actually had a wig on. Nobody knew that but the anthropologist and us. And he talks about she had a wig and he threw it out the window after he killed our very first victim. In one other case, he was able to tell what the last item that a lady had eaten was basically the carrots out of a salad and brown coffee. And the autopsy report shows undigested carrots and brown coffee. And that also was from the 70s.
It would have been dark for you, so I don't know how these pictures can really help you.
No, that must be the blanket.
Yes.
That's the blanket.
How did you remember that?
It was also important what Little said he didn't do.
We were all sitting around talking, and the detective says, yeah, he killed mine. He drew a picture of her. And I said, what year was yours? And he said, 1998. I said, no, it wasn't Sam Little. I said, he was not out in 1998. So when they go into the interview room, and this detective is starting to talk to him about that case, and I'm thinking, golly, if Sam Little confesses to killing this one, that's going to throw this whole story in the brink. I mean, it just, none of it's going to be true. And, he looked at it, oh yeah, I'm number one, yeah. But I didn't kill that one. He said, I was going to kill her. He said, I came back to kill her, but she was gone. I couldn't find her. Then I said, when Sam could have took credit for one, did not. And so they told me he's not out there just trying to get numbers. He's out there wanting to talk about his cases.
Now we get a sense of his killings, but what drove Sam Little?
Did choking with these women happen before the sex, or during, or right afterwards? When did it mostly happen?
I choose her out first.
You pick the ones that you think you're going to kill first?
No, if one depends on how I'm that.
Through Little's interviews with authorities and the media, we've developed a clear picture of his killings, how he was finally caught, and why he ultimately confessed. But let's take a step back. How did Sam Little become Sam Little? Sometimes, to get to the end, you have to start at the beginning. New York Times bestselling author Jillian Lauren knows that well, as she spent hours interviewing and studying Little.
I speak with his family. They ask me all the time, how did this happen? Why? Early childhood, sexual abuse, physical abuse.
Yeah,
because you were born in 1940, right?
I was born in 1940, yeah.
Okay.
He went to reform school for stealing a bicycle. It's called Boys Industrial School in Ohio. His family will also tell me he was nothing but trouble even before he went there. Then he just got abused and abused and abused.
He grew up in Georgia. His mother was 16 when she was pregnant, and she was in the sex worker industry.
He talked about his mother. His mother had left him on the street corner when he was, described it as being so young. He was almost a toddler.
What's really interesting here is the type of victims that he selected and his relationship with his mother. The victims that he chose were very vulnerable. They were sex workers. Some of them were addicted to drugs. These were low-income minority neighborhoods.
She was an alcoholic, and she couldn't catch a trick no more. She was in a position where a whore that couldn't do nothing more.
The women in Little's life arguably defined him and also shaped his criminal career. That includes his longtime girlfriend, Aurelia Jean Dorsey.
You were a traveling man all your life, right? How did you make money to buy cars, shoplifting?
Me and my old lady, Jean she was 70 some years. She about 30 years older than me.
And he met her in jail in 1970. And that was who was shoplifting all the goods that allowed him to travel from state to state to state, city to city, killing these prostitutes. So he was a thief by day and a killer by night.
She's a shoplifter, and I was the driver, and we'd go all over the country, everywhere. I'd stop in places overnight in the motels. She's an old lady, and I'd go out the street looking for a girl. That's how I got around so many places.
From 1971 until Dorsey's death in 1988, Little and Dorsey made quite the team, whether she realized it or not.
Because of her, you were able to kind of go around, right? Because she had the money coming in.
Yeah,
right? She knew you were going out with women.
Yeah, she knew.
But she didn't know that there was killing going on.
No,
right?
she didn't know I was going that far.
I kind of wonder if she was this maternal replacement figure. And so there was this respect and adoration towards her.
Aside from the reported 47 disciplinary infractions he received at reformatory school, in his younger years, Little was repeatedly arrested for burglaries and even assault. However, it was in 1970 when things really change.
The first victim I had was in by January, February of 1970.
Okay.
Over in Miami, Coconut Grove, Miami.
Yeah. First killing. Did you know that you wanted to kill her?
Yeah. Yeah, I had desire, strong desire to f***ing kill her.
Coming up, inside the mind of a serial killer.
Strangle women. So I had that in me for, got, well, psychological, I guess. Pulled up her body out and rolled it down there. And I heard a secondary roll of noise. That meant she was still rolling.
Convicted murderer Samuel Little spent his youth in and out of trouble for various offenses, but it's believed that on January 31st, 1970, Little killed his first victim, Mary Brosley. This was the start of a 35-year killing spree, which Little claims resulted in 93 murders. So why did he start? Well, for one, only 4 years earlier, he had been arrested for assaulting a different woman.
I believe that was the impetus for him to say, I will not leave a witness alive again.
Yet Little's interviews with investigators and the media revealed another motivation for not only how he ended up choosing his victims, but how he killed them.
One of the themes that we believe in reference to Sam Little was the neck. He was excited by the victim's neck.
You pick the ones that you think you're going to kill?
No, no. If the one depends on how the neck looks. Got a smooth neck and turned. As a child, I got attracted to
The neck part.
Yeah.
So you pick them out by the way that their neck looks, because if the neck looks good, then it might be somebody that you want to have sex with, or somebody that you might want to kill. What's the thought?
Both.
Both. Okay.
When he put their hands around our throat, he wanted them to swallow so he could feel their Adam's apple. If it was a pretty neck, you were probably going to be a victim. If you had an ugly neck, maybe not so much.
The other stuff really don't be important to me. She could be skinny and narrow.
Right.
She could be ugly.
She could be fat. She could be skinny.
Yeah, she ain't gonna be fat because the fat one's neck is
Right. Too much. Right. Yeah. He actually felt that he could have murdered before 1970. He used to touch women's necks while he would be engaged with sex with them. You had that desire before that?
I had it, but it wasn't.
But you never did it all
never
the way?
did it.
All the way.
No, never
Just
did
the
it.
choking, but never all the way to death?
Never all the way to die.
Okay. But it was a fantasy of his. And when he did it, it was easy, and it was something then that he didn't want to stop doing.
He just went out of control, I guess.
And then after that, it was...
Build up crescendo.
Interestingly, Sam Little's last known murder occurred in 2005. That was 7 years before his eventual capture. So why did he stop?
Little got old, and that's why he stopped in 2005 at the age of 65. That's a career. He still had the same urges to kill women, but physically he was failing. He knew that he might get caught if he continued to try to physically kill a woman and then, more importantly, tried to get rid of their body.
Sam Little's criminal career of sexual assault and murder can be characterized in many ways, but how Little himself views what he did, well, that's something he was very particular about.
He's a man that did not want to admit that he raped anyone. In his own mind, he wanted to be known as a killer rather than somebody that would have to take by force sex from the woman.
While we were dancing, she says, you want to go riding after this, after this party's over? So she had arm in arm, walking to the car.
He's very invested in the idea that he does not hate women. He loves women.
North Little Rock. Tell me what that girl looked like.
Oh man, I loved her.
Most people luckily don't have to know about the mechanics of strangulation, but it hurts. And he did hate women.
And then I would, then we went further, and I choked her to death.
Little was an erotic aggression subtype of rapist. And these rapists choose women who are vulnerable. They like to control them. They act out very aggressively and they act on impulse. This subtype is the least common of all subtypes, with only about 10% of serial rapists having this erotic aggression.
He was so attached to this idea that he didn't hurt them, and God made him the way he is. God gave me this twisted desire where sex and death got all twisted up inside of me like a pretzel.
That was my weakness. I guess I never could get that out of my mind, mixed up with sex.
And he would say, well, killing somebody is no different than stealing a cookie from a cookie jar, because every sin is the same, and that's Jesus and that's the Bible. And I said, actually, I think there's kind of a hierarchy. What's the first commandment? An answer. Don't wave this book around as a justification for killing women if you never read it. He was killing women for sex. That was sex for him.
When we return, sitting across from a murderer.
Yeah, he was scary to be around. Like psychologically, he's frightening.
Hey there, everybody. So we really appreciate you guys following this special Prime Crime with us. And look, one of the reasons we're able to produce a show like this is because of the incredible support that we get from our sponsors, like our proud partner, Morgan & Morgan. Look, here's the deal. If you should get injured, America's largest injury law firm, they may be who you want on your side. I mean, they have an army of over 1,000 attorneys. They have an amazing track record, like recent verdicts of $12 million in Florida and $26 million in Philadelphia. These, by the way, are higher than the highest insurance offers in these cases. There's no upfront fee. They only get paid if you get paid. And the whole process can be done right from your smartphone. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim at forthepeople.com/primecrime.
Why did you look down here?
I was trying to find a place to put the body.
Oh, I see.
Beginning in 2018 and already serving life sentences for multiple murders, serial killer Samuel Little decided to confess to his killings in a series of interviews. This helped investigators solve many unanswered questions about numerous cold cases. What was truly amazing, though, was Little's ability to recall details of his crimes from decades earlier.
Las Vegas. Describe the Las Vegas victim.
That was in 1983. She was kind of thin, dark skinned, about 40 years old when she was out there hustling.
How tall was she?
She was about 5'5", 5'3".
When we were speaking to him, he would go from talking to us in the third person to all of a sudden being there. And he would have a far off look as if he's right there doing it.
Way over here behind a furniture factory. Parked right there. And if we had to get this I choked out.
He was able to say specifically where he dumped her body, down a hole.
Steps go down, led down to the basement, but it had a rail around it too, where you couldn't fall down them steps. You had to go around to the steps. So I threw her down the steps.
Mr. Little had a very keen memory. It was almost photographic. He never took trophies. His trophy was up here in his mind. He would relive in his jail cell and his holding cell each of these killings over and over again.
Remember some young lady you dumped
In them tires.
with the tires?
Oh, that's her?
Well, you tell us.
Oh, God, yeah. That's her.
What do you remember about her?
Them eyes and that face.
During his confessions, he is smiling, he's reminiscing, it's nostalgic for him. I think that these were good times for him.
Little also shocked the world by actually drawing sketches of his victims, which investigators have been using to solve these cold case murders.
He remembered some of the names of the victims. He remembered wardrobe. He remembered buttons on some of their clothing and zippers. This went back all the way to the 1970s. It takes a special type of intelligence to have that ability.
I saw that he drew petechial hemorrhaging in their eyes, which is what happens when you strangle women. I was looking for evidence. I was like, what's the detail that he noticed about them that could possibly connect it to a confession, connect it eventually, hopefully, to a cold case, to a Jane Doe.
The people who interviewed Sam Little found themselves in a unique position. They were there to find out more information about these killings. Yet in the process, they became close to a brutal murderer.
We started writing letters. He sent me a Christmas letter, and he talked about wanting to help me solve any case that he thinks he did. If I would send him the information, he would do whatever he could.
Our conversations veered from sports, boxing, my kids, my meatloaf. He liked to hear what it was like to actually be a human being. It made him feel like one for a minute. And then he would talk about murdering.
Despite any pleasantries or bonding, don't for 1 second think that interviewers ever forgot who they were speaking to.
I'll just say that when you see his hands, you'll see just how monstrous they are. I didn't feel in danger myself because I knew that he didn't mind men. If my daughter were in that room alone, if anyone's daughter was in that room, he may still murder that person, even though he was 70 years of age. He felt he could get away with it, he would.
Did you ever shoot any of these girls?
Shoot.
Yeah, with a gun?
My hands.
Just your
And
hands?
without that, I wouldn't want to do it.
He was really scary. I was always sort of calculating how long it could take to really do damage and how long it would take for a guard to get to me. Like psychologically, he's frightening.
Up next, do we know about all of Little's killings, or are there more? Stay with us.
What, do you think her body might have been hidden where you dumped her over that fence? Or do you think somebody would have found it eventually?
Yeah, I think it's very rare they could have found her.
Through serial killer Samuel Little's confessions, law enforcement and prosecutors from different states were able to solve dozens of cold case investigations, and Little was finally convicted and sentenced to multiple life terms of imprisonment for several murders. At the time of this taping, over half of his killings have been confirmed.
He spoke about 93 different cases. So far, from my understanding, 62 different female bodies have actually been identified as his killings. And I'm sure that there are more bodies out there.
There's a continuing investigation still going on with the ones that were never identified. And we know some of these weren't listed as homicides. They were listed as either overdose deaths or they fell off a ravine. Sometimes the damage wasn't really available to say that it was a homicide. And some of these were mislabeled.
I wish the hell I didn't, but it can't be turned back. Not only her, it's a bunch of more that I'm regretful for, and I'm constantly saying I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. Well, for this family, they have closure now. You've confessed to it. You've told us what you did, how you did it, why you did it, and I personally thank you for that.
Is it possible, though, that Little told investigators everything? Or could he be responsible for more killings that we don't know about?
I believe he's responsible for about the number that he actually said, 93. I found him to be very credible as far as that. He was not boasting. He was very matter of fact. He wasn't trying to be the worst of the worst.
My only suspicion is that there might be men.
Tell me about Mary Ann.
She's what you nowadays they call a transgender.
There are 3 transgender women in his victims in the confessions. If there are victims he did not confess to, I think there were men.
While the work continues to verify Little's crimes, unfortunately for authorities, he can no longer help. Samuel Little died in 2020.
He was rattled at the end. He was definitely going downhill. He would say, I'm not on my deathbed yet, but I've done everything in this life now but die. And I was like, no, you haven't. because you're going to help me and we're going to find more of these victims. Sam made me his next of kin. His family doesn't want anything to do with him. With Sam being dead, it's a loss because I couldn't go back and check details with him.
Sam Little may have provided much needed closure to both law enforcement and the victims' loved ones, but in the end, it never changed who he was or what he did.
Mr. Little is not sorry about anything that he did. He was, at one point, trying to say that he felt bad for the women that he killed. But he had nothing to say about the families and the devastation that he caused across America. He was a parasite, and he deserves to be where he is right now, in the grave where he sent so many women.
And that's our story on the shocking, terrifying, and tragic case of Samuel Little. One we had never seen before, and hopefully one we never see again. That's all we have for you here on Prime Crime. Leave us your comments on Instagram and Twitter with the hashtag PrimeCrime. As always, thank you for joining us. And until next time, be safe.